All right, so thank you everyone for joining. This is one of the reoccurring webinars that I typically host, usually on a Thursday towards the end of the month. And today's webinar is going to be really a kind of an interesting one. It's going to be called Voice of the Customer. Before I get into that, though, I just want to kind of talk about a little bit what Phoenix Business Consulting is. My name is David Szymanski with Phoenix Consulting, and we are a premier provider of all SAP products and consulting services. So we really offer a very wide range of software products, and here is an overview of all the very different types of services that we have. And very proud to say that Phoenix Business Consulting has been in the service for 27 plus years, over 350 customers, and we're both in the public sector and in the commercial enterprise. So this is just kind of showing you a little bit about Phoenix Business Consulting, what we have to offer. And what is very esteemed is we are a gold SAP partner. And that means that's the very highest level that you can have. And we have a very, very strong team locally in the United States and globally. All of our consultants, SAP consultants, have at least 10 years of experience. And our team has over 15 years per person, and we are actually former Concur employees. So we have a very good knowledge base, very good expertise level of the methodology and the Concur way of doing things. And I'm here to talk about Concur. This is going to be one of the many reoccurring webinars that we always host. This one, well, sorry, this is me. I'm the Phoenix lead, and this is just a little bit of history about me, where I'm at with Phoenix, and some of the history that I had with Concur, over 15 years with Concur, as a few of my colleagues as well, are former Concur employees as well. So the agenda for today is very unique. It's just going to be a little bit different because it's not really a demonstration of functionality. It's nothing of that. It's really called Voice of the Customer. And that's you. I want to hear from you. And what is Voice of the Customer, and why does it matter? So Voice of the Customer gives you the opportunity, and it gives us the opportunity to listen and to hear some of your feedback, good or bad, some of the challenges that you have, some of the pain points that you're going through. Some of those things are very important for us to understand. And, it helps us understand what you need, and, what is your wish list? What do you want to do going forward? So it's going to really align with the products, maybe offer you things that you didn't even realize. Maybe, you're talking about some type of purchasing card that you need that you never even knew you had, or the ability to do that. So it helps us to align products that maybe can help you for further services or just for support. So it's really important to hear from you, good or bad. We want to know everything that you're experiencing. And why does it matter? Why is this important? It's important for Phoenix Business Consulting and our Concur team to really listen to you so you can have improvement and better experiences going forward. It's going to really identify gaps, and maybe it's going to identify things that you're not even aware that Concur can do. Concur is a very, very powerful tool. It supports a lot of different things. So it's good to understand where you're coming from, and it's good to understand, what we can offer. And really, it's going to drive this innovation, and it supports you at a competitive advantage. So it's important to listen to you, hear you, and what can we do to make it better for you? What are some things that we can offer? So
hey, Dave, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. So I'm hoping that, and I like what I heard, is people can just interject and talk. This is an informal type of presentation. Like I said, it's not a demonstration of formality. It's really listening to you, hearing you. So I'm going to open up the floor, and then Dustin, I have Dustin here too to field any type of questions. If you put it in the chat, if you feel more comfortable doing that, that's possible too. but I'm going to just open up the floor and just want to hear some of your experiences, good or bad. And anybody want to go ahead and start?
Hi, Dave. This is Lisa Langler. I guess I'll go ahead and start.
Absolutely, Lisa.
Okay, so I've had a couple things, good and bad. Um, I'll start with what I just came out of yesterday and partly from today. So I am a super user, as you are aware, and I did a workflow change because what was happening was our expense reports were going to the CEO at a certain step within the workflow. We wanted to stop that behavior. So we made some changes within the workflow as approved in our test environment. We tested it, everything was great. Moving forward, I was approved to move the changes into production. What we did not know when we were doing that, at the time I was moving the changes in production, on the May 16th date, at the hour of 11 a.m., which is Central Standard Time, there was an employee who had already submitted an expense report for that certain step called CapEx, which is a project within our organization, at 7:53 a.m. Central Standard Time on the same day. So constantly what we've learned through the experience is this report that was sent on the same date at 7:53 a.m. was part of the original workflow. So what happened was the report at the step that it was not supposed to, because we were making changes to the workflow, went to our CEO again for approval. It now became a question. After doing researches and testing and digging, we found through many reporting that I was able to create in Cognos, which was the best thing to back up the data and all the configuration changes I made. This one report, only one, pretty much thank goodness, was the only one that was considered in flight, because it was already in flight to be approved when I made the changes to the workflow in production. So to correct the issue, so I had to identify the issue, and I had to identify the root cause, which I did. And the resolution was to pull back the expense report as expense processor and get approval to log in and make myself an approver for the manager who had already approved the report, send it back through to watch the behavior of the workflow, and everything has been completed and taken to its final destination. So now the report went to the new updated workflow. So the lesson we learned was that you make any changes in the workflow in production, you might have to have ready on hand, ready to go, two things: a Cognos report that will pull all in-flight expense reports that may not reflect the new workflow changes you're making in production. And number two, have your queries built in expense processor so that you can run reports to make sure that there's no other reports in flight that are coming. And all of that was validated. So that was one lesson I've learned. I wish I would have known that, I wish I would have known that before I had made the changes in production, because I would have ran that in-flight report in both expense processor and Cognos, but now we have learned. And number two, the other great thing that I use in building reports in Cognos is when I'm making configuration changes to see what custom fields are allowed to be used in my reporting. Sometimes you don't know what those custom fields are in the configuration. So the best thing in the world that I have learned is in forms and fields. If you go into forms and fields, you can see all the custom fields and their names and connect the dots on the back end in Concur Cognos. So when you're writing reports, you know what custom fields you're pulling into the report. That's just what I wanted to share.
And Lisa, you're looking at those fields to identify those custom fields, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Because the configuration report sometimes is not so helpful. I find that is not really resourceful for me. The best way I have found the workaround is to look in forms and fields to see those custom fields and their names.
I'm really happy to hear you say that. And that's exactly digging into the system to find it, because the configuration report is just that. It's a kind of a snapshot of the report, high level of your configuration. But to drill down to certain things that you're looking for, if you understand the forms and the fields as you do, you located the custom field located in the fields. It's very important. Sometimes depends on the way the site is set up, and that's why it's very important to follow Concur's best practice. because if those custom fields in the fields are wiped away or moved or repurposed or something like that, it's problematic. And as you identified, you did locate that in the field section. So
Yes,
that's very good that you did that.
yes. And overall, and on a final note, I will just suggest this to everyone that's on this call. In every configuration that you do within the Concur system itself, have someone on hand that knows how to build reports and write them in Cognos, because that is your backup to the data in production. That's it.
And Lisa, you have a test environment and a production environment too, correct?
I do, and I can take production reports that I have built for both travel expense and invoice and put them into my test sites and test reports in my test environments now as well. Yes.
Yeah. That's very good, because you want to make sure it's tested adequately before you can move it into production. And testing is the name of the game. It's continually testing to make sure you're yielding the right results, and also regression testing yielding results where it shouldn't or shouldn't be doing something.
Correct.
Yeah.
It well rounds you all the way around the block for sure.
So when you were identifying this workflow problem with the timing, you said May 16th, CapEx and the time and everything, how were you able to determine all that? Did you get support help? Did someone help you guide you through this? Or is this something that you were just digging and troubleshooting all on your own?
Okay, no, I did reach out to Concur for
Okay.
support,
Yeah.
only because the timing on this end was so problematic. It was extremely time sensitive, and I wanted to have another set of eyes on basically the data. So, and plus, when you are pulling through a live report without actually being the manager approving the report, you can't submit a report and approve at the same time. So I had Concur on the back end. They pushed the report through with my approvals that I received, and then they submitted the report, and then I was able to approve on the front end, on the back end. So we did a toggle back and forth to see the behavior of the report because it was so time sensitive.
You did all the right things. You contacted Concur, they advised you and helped you, and this is a very good story. This is the kind of feedback we love to hear, because you had a situation, you worked it through, they were able to support you in it, and you were able to test it. You utilized Cognos reporting, you utilized all your resources, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy thing. It probably took time and testing and everything else. And ironically, that's what we do at Phoenix when we're doing support or troubleshooting. It's the same identical thing, is really digging down deep into the situation. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to figure that out. It's not like a quick fix, and testing is very, very important. So Lisa, that's a very successful story. You overcame a challenge, and the workflow is working correctly. It's not going to the CEO, the CapEx approver.
No, the workflow is definitely working. It is working as expected. And the reason why we did not recreate the wheel in test for this particular situation, because it would take way too much, it'd be way too cumbersome to recreate the wheel in test. So we did this in production as a one-time off experience. And yes, it was definitely the result of this report going to the CEO was most definitely because it was one thing, goodness out of many that were in flight when the changes were being made in production. So if I could just, anything that anyone is doing in production, especially with workflows, because reports are moving through the workflow, if you're going to make changes, as soon as you make the changes in the production, do a backup report in Cognos and expense processor to make sure there's no other reports in flight that could be part of the old workflow that will not reflect the new changes. That's what I have learned.
I'm glad you shared that, Lisa, and that's a good successful story. So appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else to talk about? Any other things that did not work correctly, or anything you disliked, or pain points that you're experiencing, or anything else to share?
From my end, right now, after what I just came out of, no.
Well, that's positive. That's good. Awesome. Okay. Anybody else like to share anything that you're experiencing?
Hey, David.
Yeah,
Hey, it's Dawn. I was just going to add a couple of comments for Lisa, if that's okay, if there's nothing,
no, absolutely, Don. This is
nothing else.
yeah.
So, hi, Lisa. I work with David, and so you are correct that the workflow will never reset until it's recalled and resubmitted or newly created after the new workflow is put in place, and that is super important to know that when you're making changes like that. The other thing that you might want to consider is putting in a rule, an audit rule to prevent people from submitting while you're in the midst of applying the new workflow and making those changes. And then I hear that you want to use Cognos, but just remember that Cognos is always a day behind. So I know that you also said you were using Processor to identify, what reports were in flux, but Cognos will always be a day behind. So if you're trying to catch things, like in this scenario where they could have happened before 11 o'clock or whatever time that was that you were putting the workflow in, processor is going to be your best bet. And that would just a simple query, where report is not equal approved.
Got it. Yes, you know what, you make a very valid point there. And that is exactly the reason why I pulled processor as well, because the changes they were made. This is already the 22nd. Those were made on May 16th. I wanted to see what was already captured in Cognos, and then I want to capture what was actually coming out of expense processors as of, yesterday when I did this. But yes, you are correct. That's why I pulled reports from both. But you are correct. Cognos is one day behind for sure. But thank you. I learned from you that the audit rule would be the other way to stop reports from going through. That is one thing I can think about for the future, and that was very very helpful
Yeah,
to me.
sure. Especially depending on how long it's going to take you to put that workflow in, if it's complicated or if it's a lot. But I'm assuming you're going to build it ahead of time and then just activate it, when you're ready so that you minimize, the amount of time that you have to worry about that activity.
That's another great point you make. I did not do that.
Oh, okay.
Should have had it pre-built and ready to hit go when I was approved. That is another great point that you make. Thank you very much. I will note that.
Sure. And have you used test user functionality in production?
I have. I used to have a
Okay.
test. I don't want to say site. It used to be a test group, but we no longer
Yeah.
use a test group. We're not allowed to use a test group any longer because we have the test site. We just got the test site a few months ago.
Oh, you're allowed to do both, but that's okay. If ever you need to put in a change like that in production and don't have the opportunity to get it built in the test site first, if it's critical enough, you could use test user functionality, a test policy, a test group, and test that workflow out in a production environment before you actually activate it for your live users.
I would love to do that, and I agree with you 100%. I did that when I was at Abbott Labs. We use both, but here at this company where I work, they would only like us to use test site. Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. Perfect.
Well, Don, really thank you for that advice. And Lisa, thank you for sharing that. And I might want to add, Lisa, Don is our functional consultant, senior functional consultant, and workflow is her strong point. And as you can tell, she's very passionate and she's very knowledgeable. Workflow is not an easy thing. Some people want to put a natural, simple workflow. As you evolve, that natural simple workflow evolves and all of a sudden it's a little bit more complicated. So it's a lot of digging and researching and understanding the system. As she had mentioned, the audit rule and Cognos reporting a day behind. Those are all very good things to consider and think about. So
Yes. Thank you so much.
oh, thank you. Thank you. Dawn, thank you as well.
Sure.
Um, is there anybody else? Please, this is a great opportunity just to really voice it out of what you're experiencing. So anybody else have any stories to tell? Any voice that you want to address?
Got a good question in the Q&A here, David. Someone asked, we want to make our workflow more automated, approving by a dollar threshold, but we would like it to be based on departments. Is this possible?
Oh, very possible. Yes, absolutely. What you're describing there is a cost object based workflow on an allocation. So it's very, very possible. And what that is essentially is, I'll give you an example kind of is, say, for example, you did an expense report, say for $500, just making that up. And you have certain departments that you're allocating this to. And allocation is the key thing because allocation gives you the ability to distribute or cross-charge your expense line item. So let's say you had 5 different departments that you're doing this allocation, you know, after that report gets submitted, that expense report essentially bursts to 5 different individual cost object owners. And there's 2 things actually. You can base it upon a dollar threshold, or you can base it upon a level in which that cost object owner resides in. So absolutely, cost object workflows is very automated. To build that, it's usually always on the allocation line level, and it requires a lot of testing. As Dawn had mentioned earlier, you want to test these things out and make sure you understand, if there's going to be a skip step involved or any of the other type of requirements. But yeah, absolutely, that's one of the more common type of workflows, depending on the nature of what you're trying to accomplish. And you can do that on what we call a simple list, or you can do it on a connected list, which is, your departments or your org structures. Good question.
Actually, I have
Okay.
another good question here in the
Yeah.
Q&A.
Mhm.
Last webinar, you had talked about primary configuration, which was very informative. So they asked, one of the topics was expense type creation. We have multiple policies, but only want this to be enforced in 2 of them. Is that possible?
Can you, let me just make sure I understand that question. So you have one expense type that wants to be into multiple different types of policies?
So we have multiple policies, but only want this to be enforced in 2 of them. One of the topics was expense type creation.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, very much so. As a matter of fact, let me just show you versus tell you. I think sometimes showing is very helpful. And I actually have my site up here just in case of a question came up such as that. So this is good timing. So expense types, when you have the unrestricted access to Concur, you're going to be able to do a lot of different things. And what's really important with Concur, it's like a puzzle. It all has to kind of interconnect. In other words, expense types, it's not just the creation of an expense type, it's identifying where it's going to go. In other words, what policy do you want this to go to? What form is going to be attached to? And what is your accounting? Where is it going to be mapping to in your accounting system? So, for example, if I was going to go into, if this is your system, just like this, you see the word called expense types. And let's just say, for example, you want to build an expense type and map it to 2 different policies. So it's a wizard. It's a 5-step wizard, essentially. So in other words, when you click new, you're right here in this general section. And we're going to fill this out, and then we're going to go all the way to the accounting. So let's say, for example, it's called training fees or something. This is the new expense type you want to label. So labeling it, that's just the name of your expense type you want to create. The spend category is, and you see where it says select one, you need to identify what category are you going to put this under. And Concur, the core product of Concur is identifying these various different spend categories. And this is for reporting purposes. So let's say training would be, under training would be good here. If there's nothing here that made sense for what you're trying to capitalize on, you can always go to other. In this case, training, and I'm not going to go over all this great detail because it's not a training class per se, but has this a parent means where do you want to put this expense type? Under what parent? So let's put this under the word fees. So step 1 is creating the expense type. The answer to that question resides in number 2. So when I click next at the bottom right, you have the ability, or Concur, will say, okay, what policy do you want this to be active? I want it to be to the Phoenix expense policy, or I want it to go to the Canadian one. Canadian or any other country other than the United States is going to be VAT related, VAT, and that has a different form altogether to it. So if I made a mistake, I said, okay, no, I want it to go to the sample expense policy. So this is where you're telling the expense type to reside in as an active expense type. And then we need to identify the form. And right when Lisa was talking earlier about forms and fields, this is where forms and fields will reside when you want to attach the form to the expense type. So Concur's core product has all these various different forms already configured. And then if you hover down a little bit lower, you see the word VAT, V-A-T. Or you'll see the word non-VAT, because it's assuming it's a VAT country, VAT. United States is a non-VAT country, meaning we're not calculating the value-added tax. So I would select a form. I would select maybe non-VAT business purpose for my expense. And then just clicking right here, automatically, this is going to follow. I'm not going to even click anything. It's just going to automatically attach to it, because when you're doing your itemizations. So same thing. If I want to select the form, it's a really great question. It will follow over. These next two steps, formulas and attendees, this is a calculation formula. It's a little bit more in depth if you want to calculate custom fields versus having someone indicate what it costs. You can say, you know, I had 5 books multiplied times 100, and it's going to give you based on these custom fields. So it's a calculation formula that you put in. Not all customers use that. And then clicking next is going to take you to number 4, which is identifying attendees. In this case, training fees have nothing to do with attendees, so I can just pass this up. Next is number 5. So if I click next down below here, it takes me to my accounting, my ledger. This is our sample sandbox, but as you can see, we have a lot of different ledgers in here. So let's say it's in the SAP, S for HANA, S4. I would highlight that and put in, you know, whatever my GL account code is. So creating that expense type is mapping it to more than one policy, is identifying it in the policies here. And then you need to go through this wizard, attach it to the accounting, and then finally you can just click done. And that's the creation of the expense type. So if I was to come all the way down to the bottom where I created that, training fees, and it's active. And it's active per the policies that you select. If I was to go into the Canadian policy right now, I would still see the expense type, but it would be blocked out, it'd be grayed out, and it would be inactive. So hopefully that answered that question regarding expense types to multiple different policies. Is there any other stories, any other success stories, anything that Lisa, you identified a pain point and overcame that with the challenge. That was a very successful story. I'd love to hear that. Is there any other stories that anybody else has that they'd like to share? Okay. Dustin, is there any other questions to field in the chat?
Yes, in Q&A, people are still writing in there. Really good
Cool.
questions. Good one here is, how does Concur help with compliance and policy control?
That's a great question. So compliance and policy control is essentially configurable options that are allowing you to build, such as audit rules. Dawn had mentioned an audit rule. So that means, for example, if you want to create something of maybe, or flag something that's overspending, you want to maybe put an expense type and say, if it's a meal, you're not allowed to spend over, $50 for lunch. You can, for a compliance, you can build in an audit rule. You can either block it entirely, or you can just make it a warning, and they can continue on as a warning. So there's just levels of compliance you can do. And then for travel, for example, you can do pre-approvals to ensure compliance that before the booking is even made, by putting in these certain audit rules. So, and these audit rules that you can create an audit trail. And that's ways of identifying patterns and trends and things. So compliance is always audit rule driven. Policy is really, people sometimes can get that confused because you think of policy as, expense policy, travel policy, HR policy, rules, governance, in Concur, policy is really a container of information. It holds things such as your different forms or the expense types, or more importantly, the workflow. So all those things are baked into the policy. Compliance is the audit rules that you can help with control your spending. So
Hey,
there,
Dave, I can also speak to that as well. I have an issue with that one too.
yeah.
Okay, so we're in the process of launching SACs within our organization, and I'm on another huge project, and the task is to stay compliant with everything in the Concur configuration. So what has happened is we are required to manage our roles access. We are required to watch the configuration changes. So I'm using the change log for both expense and invoice. And what we need to confirm is to back up all of the configuration changes and role changes in the system. So I'm using Concur Cognos to back up the reports out of the change log for invoice, let's just say. So I'm right now working on reports to make sure that if I pull out of the change log for invoice for changes that were made today, I pull my report, I only see 4 lines as well with those changes. And that is right now working as expected with some pain points, but we are working through those.
And to add to that too, Lisa, the change log is good. It's identifying the changes that are happening right there and then, but they're high level changes. It's not going to get into the detail. For example, change log. You're right in change log, as you can see my screen. And if I were to identify, say today's what? Today's the 22nd. You can select, first name, last name, or, the configuration type equals. So this change, is going to have some pre-coded things in here. So, maybe I was just literally talking about expense types. So if I click on search, it's going to tell me the date and time at 3:31. This is me. I'm the Phoenix administrator. And this is the change that I did. But it tells me at a high level the creation. It's not going to get into the granular detail of what that change was, but at least it can tell you what change was taking place in the system, when it took place, and give you a description, high level, of what that is. But then what you had mentioned is good is go into the Cognos reports to see more granular different changes. Change log is very good functionality in the system, and it will tell you who's in there, who's doing what, and a date and timestamp.
Yes, and the reason why we built the Cognos reports was because our SOX compliance team wanted to see the backup details to the change log was working accurately. So how we backed it up is to build a report in Cognos and to make sure that everything was aligned, and it is.
Yeah, no, and I heard you mention too about compliance and looking at the Concur system. Well, Concur is a global template, and that's the beauty of Concur. It's already pre-configured and has all the statutory requirements for different countries and best practices in there, and that evolves too. All the release notes, the new enhancements that are always constantly, evolving all the time. I always recommend everyone on this call too, if you have access to your system, is go in there and see the new release notes that are happening every month too, because this global template evolves. Travel allowance has been evolving. Car configuration has been evolving. Things are constantly changing. VAT is always constantly changing. So with compliance, staying within global template, you're always going to be safe.
Yes, that is also another part of my process for compliance, is to document, we create an SOP on the documentation of release notes. And every month I need to run a report through that validates that everything that is in the release notes has been successfully taken care of or is not needing any of our attention. So, yep, that's another part of the process.
That's awesome, Lisa. It sounds like you are like you got a lot of different hats on and you're doing a lot of different things, and hopefully Concur is making your life easy, not more difficult too. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm going through definitely some fires, but it's through many colleagues and friends, and sometimes Concur. Yep, are the
Yeah.
one that's helping me real well. Sometimes there is a little bit of frustration with not getting a response from Concur quickly, but that's because of the package we have chosen, right? And I've seen the Cadillac of Cadillac packages from, not having anything to having everything. And I will just say this, in my career, Abbott Labs had the Cadillac of Cadillac services where you make a phone call to Concur, they are at your becking feet within a minute. Here,
Yeah.
so much, because that's the package we chose.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good point. You bring up some really good valid points, but at least, at the end of the day, you're doing all the right things. You're reaching out to the right people. You're doing all the adequate testing, and you're getting informed, and things are going, getting corrected. So that's what's really the most important part of it. And you're dealing with that. So congratulations to you on that. That's good. Really
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah. All right. It doesn't sound like there's any other feedback. Anybody else? I just want to throw out there one more time. This is a great opportunity to discuss what's going on in your world. Love to hear it. If not, if there's any other questions, Dustin, is there anything else in the?
We had one. What's the best way to manage configuration changes without affecting active users? It's a great question.
Well, that is a great question, and Dawn actually kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. Yeah, so I don't know if she has a tea or what. Great question. Well, two things, and Lisa, you're doing one of those now because you do have that test environment, so that's the absolute best way to do that. But is having test users, and then the test groups. Typically what happens in an implementation, if you just in production, you're gonna have a test policy, a test workflow, a test group, and test users. So those are all it's not going to affect the performance in the production environment. It's isolated from that. So the best way to manage that is just, creation of that test user. Just be mindful. One thing though, of those out there is if you do create a test user, they are a test user and they cannot be converted back to like a regular user and vice versa. So a test user is just that, and it's isolated from everything else. And if you're in a production environment, do exactly that, test things out in that test user, test policy, test group, test workflow that you're creating, and then you should be able to test with no problems in your production environment. That was a really good question.
Yep, that was one of the last questions we had in the QA here. I know we touched on it. Just wanted to make sure we got a good enough thorough answer there.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. All right, everyone. Well, that really concludes this. I know I'm really happy to hear the voice of the customer. I'm really happy to hear some of your experiences. We'll continue doing these more on down the road. Typically, the reoccurring webinars are more functionality driven. This one was a little bit different, and it's really good to hear your experiences. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Last thing I do want to show you before we conclude is if you don't mind, if you can just scan that little QR code, and that gives us some feedback of what you thought of the presentation and even future things that you want to have going forward, that Phoenix can go ahead and look for content, and then we can go ahead and present that to you going forward. So with that being said, everyone, thank you for your time. We really, truly appreciate it, and best of luck to you. And if you do have questions or concerns, you can always reach out to Phoenix, and we're more than happy to help you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.